Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English, and in a series of events that had led to the ceasefire between US and Israel, we'll be discussing who has actually won the war, whether it is the US or Israel. So a ceasefire deal had been struck between US and Israel, and ultimately the ceasefire will last for about 2 weeks. So 15 days ceasefire had been agreed between both the parties, and now a series of negotiations will start in Pakistan, in Islamabad. Now, when it comes to the ceasefire, the Trump administration had paused all the military actions, although certain military action through Israel, it is still continuing in the region, and Israel has said that although a deal can be struck with Iran, but at the same time it will continue targeting Hezbollah network that is there. At the same time, when it comes to the Iran have claimed the victory while allowing the safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, although it had stated that any passage of the ships that goes through the Strait of Hormuz have to be moderated by the IRGC that is there. At the same time, the Pakistan Prime Minister have invited both the sides for the talk that will begin from 10th of April in Pakistan, Islamabad. So this is what had led to the series of events. There were lots of, it was something like there was no near that was being seen in the case of US-Iran war. But at the same time, now the ceasefire deal had been struck between both the nation, and the Iran has given a 10-point framework that the US says that it could be a starting point for the negotiations that will be there. So the 40-day conflict that had been halted hours just before the deadline that was issued by the US administration or the Trump. At the same time, the ceasefire had been broken by Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and the formal negotiation had been scheduled for April 10 in the Islamabad. And US envoys Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, as well as J.D. Vance, they will be attending the negotiations that will take place in Islamabad from the 10th of April. Now, when it comes to the degradation or the losses, both of the sides, they have lost so much in this war. When it comes to US losses, it has, when it comes to the impact, the economic impact of the complete war, so ultimately it was about $31 billion, the total direct financial cost that had been incurred on the US economy in these 40 days. At the same time, more than 13,000 targets had been struck in the Iranian territory, and the strategic loss that US had because of this war was the loss of the 5th Fleet Operational Command, which is located in Bahrain, and it had been severely compromised. At the same time, US has lost more than 40 aircrafts, which includes the aircrafts like F-15, F-35, A-10 Warthog, MQ-9 Reaper, as well as C-135. At the same time, when it comes to the Iranian side have lost so much. There had been assassination of the supreme leader Khamenei. Along with them, there were top military personnel who have lost their lives in this complete war. At the same time, there were 15 warships that were destroyed alongside major radar and defense systems of Iran. And also there had been economic hit because now there had been a critical reduction in the capacity and the capability of the global export of the oil of Iran, because the Kurg island had been hit just few hours before the critical deadline that was there, after which the ceasefire had been, the agreement had been between both the countries. Now, when it comes to the Iran's 10-day demands which are there, so Iran has put forward its 10 demands in front of the USA, and we can bifurcate these demands into the demand that deals with the sovereignty and security, where the Iran has asked that there should be or there will be a non-aggression pact between US and Iran. At the same time, there will be withdrawal of the US combat forces from the region, and there will be cessation of war on all the fronts, that is over on Hezbollah as well as on Houthi rebels. Alright, although this demand is not favored by the Israel. Let's see what happens during the negotiations. At the same time, there are economic and nuclear validation demands as well, where the Iran wants that there should be recognition of Iran's nuclear enrichment rights, and also there should be lifting of all the primary US sanctions which are there. And ultimately, there should be the secondary third-party sanctions, just like the sanctions which had been imposed on India for buying the Iran oil. So such type of sanctions should be lifted. There should be termination of the UN Security Council and IAEA board sanctions and resolutions as well, and the payment should be there for the financial compensation for the damages that the Iran has dealt because of this Iranian war. At the same time, it had asked for the, when it comes to the demand that deals with the geographic leverage, so Iran has asked that it will continue the Iranian military operation and the control of the Strait of Hormuz will lie with the Iran. At the same time, the ceasefire explicitly linked to the controlled Hormuz reopening that we have seen after the ceasefire. Now the Iran has agreed that for the 2 weeks period, that is the period of the ceasefire, all the ships, they can transit from the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, Iran has also said that their hands are on the trigger, and any kind of escalation or any kind of retaliation that happens against Iran, again the war will continue or the war will ensue. Now this is very important to note over here that the tensions between US and Iran, they started in 1979. Before that, both Iran and US had a very amicable relationship, but in 1979, when there was a complete revolution. So after the revolution, there are the decades of the hostility that are between US and Iran. At the same time, what happened was that there was a joint comprehensive plan of action or the nuclear deal that was stuck, or the meetings or the discussions, they started in 2015. However, in 2018, USA withdrew itself from the joint comprehensive plan of action or the nuclear deal with Iran. At the same time, during 2024 to 2026 till now, we have seen that there had been direct military exchanges. There was 12 days war last year as well, and also we have seen that there had been maritime tanker wars where the oil tankers, they were hit by the Iranian military, and the complete blockade of the Strait of Hormuz had been there. Now, when it comes to the repercussions, all right, so we have seen that the complete war had global repercussions, because the Strait of Hormuz is the place from where near about 20% of the global trade in the crude oil it happens. Now, when it comes to the international relations, now we can see that there has been a shift from the military confrontation to the diplomacy of brinkmanship, because we have seen both the sides, they have hit each other till the time they cannot continue more, and ultimately now they have decided to sit on the sidelines of the table and discuss a peace deal. At the same time, there had been erosion of red lines from the both of the sides, and both sides have hit the civilian as well as the nuclear power plants as well, and that is the red lines that both the parties or both the nations, they have crossed, that we have seen in this war. At the same time, there is the role of China as well, because it will act as a back channel mediator when it comes to US and Iran. At the same time, when it comes to the economic dimension of this ceasefire, there will be an impact on the global supply chain that we have already seen during this complete war. Oil market stability is very important, and as soon as this ceasefire deal was struck and the ceasefire was announced, there was immediate drop into the Brent crude prices, and that is a welcome step that we have seen. Even when it comes to India, India has welcomed the ceasefire, and India is looking forward for a positive outcome when it comes to the negotiation between both the sides. Because when it comes to India's math, economically, you must note that every $10 rise in the oil prices, that impacts the current account deficit by near about 0.5% of the GDP. At the same time, there are certain security dimension as well to the complete deal, because when it comes to the Iran had used choke point strategy, where it has a complete leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, and it had a complete blockade of the Strait of Hormuz during the complete 40-day period through which this war loomed. At the same time, there is the possibility of the cyber warfare and proxy wars as well by Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels as well. Alright, so when it comes to the cyber warfare, over here, Iran had said clearly that if anything happens to the Iran and Iran's demands are not met clearly, so in that case, Iran will move forward with the cyber warfare, and ultimately it will deny any kind of possibility that the US can have for the oil in the West Asian region. Alright, so that is all the, when it comes to both the sides. At the same time, both the sides, they are announcing their victory on the social media platform. where the US have said that this is a victory for US, and the Iran is also celebrating it as a victorious step for Iran as well. But at the same time, what is the real perspective? So when it comes to the real perspective, when it comes to US, they have eliminated the top Iranian leadership, Khamenei, and also proved that there is immense conventional strike capability that is with the USA forces, whether it is Marine Forces, Air Force, or even the, when it comes to the infantry forces. At the same time, there are more than 13,000 targets which have been hit by the USA in the Iran during this 40-day period. At the same time, there had been strategic failure because the thing that the USA said that there will be a regime change, that did not happen. So they failed to achieve the regime change. They have lost their 5th Fleet headquarters. At the same time, they suffered severe diplomatic isolation, where the NATO members, they denied using their bases for the US operation. And also, they had been forced to negotiate over a geographic choke point. So that is the strategic failure when it comes to USA. At the same time, when it comes to the Iran proved its ability to paralyze the complete global trade via the choke point, that is Strait of Hormuz, and also it has successfully struck the US bases. Despite US having the advanced air defense, still it had been able to struck the US bases, force the Washington to come to the negotiating table in Islamabad. At the same time, the Iran had also threatened to close the Red Sea route as well. So this is where the Iran had hit very severely, and that is at the economy of the globe. At the same time, there had been certain strategic failure for Iran as well. That is, it suffered the generational losses to the military commanders, the infrastructure, the loss of the irreplaceable foundational leadership, and complete economic devastation that has occurred in Iran. All right. So when it comes to the complete scenario, there had been a hegemonic transition because of this complete war, because we have seen that there is the death of the unipolar Middle East region. At the same time, there is the triumph of the asymmetry, where a very small and limited forces of the Iran, they have compelled the USA to come to the negotiating table. And at the same time, there are transactional alliances where we have seen that the countries, if their economy will suffer, they will not bow down to even the global superpowers that was seen during this war. So ultimately, when it comes to the US and Iran war that we have seen, you can see that in the complex chessboard of the West Asia, a ceasefire is just not the end of the game. It is not the end of the game. It is just a 14-day, 15-day period where this had been, paused. And ultimately, a strategic reshuffling of the pieces will be seen in the near future. So that would be all. But at the same time, before moving ahead, you can join me on my Telegram channel so that you can get the regular updates and the PDFs for the sessions that I conduct on the YouTube. At the same time, if you are preparing for the civil services for 2007 or 2008, you can use my code for the maximum discount while enrolling into the courses. That is BRS Live. You can use this code and ultimately you can enroll into these foundation courses for the UPSC Civil Services examination, that is the resolution batch. Please remember, these batches are available in English medium, in Hindi medium, and in bilingual medium, all the 3 mediums. Alright, so that would be all. Plus, do not forget to like the session, share the session, and subscribe to our channel for more such future updates. Thank you, bye-bye, take care, and Jai Hind.